Apple's new MacBook Neo has officially entered the whole MacBook lineup, and it immediately raises an interesting question for anyone shopping for a Mac right now. Should you go with the brand new ultra affordable MacBook Neo or spend a bit more and pick up the MacBook Air? While these two laptops might seem fairly similar at first glance, there's actually a lot of differences and it's designed for different types of people. So in this video, we're going to break down which one is really for you and which one makes the most sense depending on how you plan to use your laptop. And we'll start with a brief refresher on the MacBook Neo because it goes on sale tomorrow. The MacBook Air has been around for quite a few generations, but this is Apple's new entry point into the Mac lineup, and the biggest headline here is the price. Starting at just $599, the Neo is by far the most affordable MacBook that Apple has released in years. The most affordable laptop Apple offered before that was the MacBook Air, which was starting at $999, but now with the latest M5 release, it has jumped up to a starting price point of $1099. That lower price point for the Neo is really the entire purpose of this machine. Apple designed the Neo to bring macOS experience to people who either don't need a lot of power or simply just don't want to spend over $1,000 on a laptop. Because of that, the MacBook Neo is really targeted towards everyday users. If your laptop usage mostly revolves around browsing the web, streaming video, checking email, writing documents, attending video calls, or using lightweight applications, or even some of the heavier ones, I'm confident that you can edit photos and videos on this. It's just not going to be anything crazy. It can handle all of the other tasks just fine. It's powered by an A18 Pro chip, which is derived from Apple's iPhone processors. That might sound unusual for a laptop, but it actually performs fairly well, especially with single-core tasks that make up most of everyday computing. Opening apps, browsing in Safari, watching YouTube, and general productivity tasks should all feel quick and responsive. Where the Neo will start to show its limitations is with heavier workloads, especially in the GPU department. So things like editing larger video, working with complex creative software, running demanding development tools, etc. All of those will probably limit the machine quite a bit. Apple is clearly positioning the Neo as a simple, reliable computer for basic everyday users, rather than the power users. So if you think of yourself as a power user, you might want to look into the Air or the MacBook Pro. So in my opinion, MacBook Neo buyers ideally look like a student, a casual home user, or someone who just is getting their first Mac, or even someone who might want a secondary laptop for travel and just doesn't want to ruin their main machine in case something happens to it. Now, on the other side of this comparison is the MacBook Air, which continues to serve as Apple's mainstream laptop. While the Neo focuses more on affordability, the Air is designed to be much more capable all-around machine. It uses an M series of chip. It's on the M5 now, which offers significantly stronger performance across the board, not just in CPU or single-core tasks, but also with multi-core workloads and graphics performance. It's no MacBook Pro, but it's definitely highly capable. The extra power makes a big difference for anyone who uses their laptop beyond the basic tasks that we talk about. So for me, I could definitely get into the creative apps that I use a lot, like Final Cut, Logic, or Photoshop. If you regularly edit photos or videos or write code or do a bunch of creative or heavy intensive workflows, you'll be able to do all of that on the MacBook Air. And then also all of the other things that I talked about. If you just want a more expensive machine that has more power, but you're still doing the video calls, you're a student, etc., it's not a problem. It's just going to cost you more to have some of that extra graphic and power intensive task capabilities. The Air was my longtime go-to recommendation as the laptop for everyone because it was the cheapest entry point. But now that the Neo is here, that does change things quite a bit. So let's talk about the trade-offs. We'll get into the specs a little bit more to see which one is right for you. From a design perspective, both machines offer roughly a 13-inch liquid retina display, with the Air's display being a little bit larger. I think it comes in at like 13.6, and it has slimmer bezels compared to the Neo's, kind of like iPad Air, uniformed, thick boy bezels here. Both machines are 500 nits of brightness for the display, and I would say the difference in quality, I guess on paper, goes to the Air. You do get True Tone and a couple of other things, but personally, if you put them together side by side, I don't know. I don't think anyone's really going to notice that much of a difference. I think they're pretty equal, so you're not going to be skimping out on the display as much with the Neo. The Neo also looks and feels pretty different compared to the Air. It has these rounded corners. It's a bit of a smaller footprint overall compared to the Air. While the Air remains a thinner machine, the machines both weigh the exact same weight. And the MacBook Neo is no slouch in the thinness department either. It's pretty thin. Now, some interesting differences here is that the MacBook Neo does not have a backlit keyboard or a haptic trackpad. Instead, the trackpad goes back to the older days where you actually have to physically click it in when pressed. And it only has Touch ID when configured with 512 gigs of storage and adding an extra $100 to that. They are also available in different color options, but the MacBook Neo gets a little bit more fun here, with the color of the MacBook Neo kind of giving a lighter shade over to the keyboard, which personally, in my opinion, just makes it a lot better to look at, and I don't know why. But speaking of colors, the Neo comes in silver, indigo, citrus, and blush, while the Air comes in silver, sky blue, midnight, and starlight, and I think those colors are slightly boring compared to the Neo. One of the biggest differences consumers will notice right away is the processor inside each machine. As I mentioned earlier, the Neo runs an iPhone chip, an A18 Pro to be specific, so that gives you 6-core CPU and a 5-core GPU. The MacBook Air, on the other hand, uses the more powerful M-series chip, the M5, with a 10-core CPU and at least an 8-core GPU, but you can go up to 10 depending on the configuration, giving this significantly stronger performance for multitask, creative apps, and heavier workloads. At least on paper. I have not tested the Neo with some of those things, so who knows, it could be surprising. The Air also has far more memory options to choose from. You can go all the way up to 32 gigs of RAM. The Neo only comes with 8 gigs. It's also going to start with a base storage that doubles the Neo, so you have 16 gigs of RAM to start with on the MacBook Air. From a battery life perspective and for charging, the Air will still pull ahead here. The Neo offers up to 16 hours for video playback. I still don't know why we use that as a unit of measurement. Has a 36.5 watt-hour battery, while the MacBook Air lasts about 18 hours thanks to its much larger 53.8 watt-hour battery. The Air also supports MagSafe charging and fast charging with higher wattage adapters, while the Neo charges only through USB-C, does not have a MagSafe port, so one of those USB-C ports is really going to be used for charging most of the time, so really you only have one USB-C port. And speaking of connectivity, I guess, as I mentioned, you do have 2 USB-C ports on the Neo and 2 on the Air, but you do get MagSafe, so those 2 are freed up for whatever you might like. Those 2 are also Thunderbolt connections with speeds up to 40 gigabytes per second and can drive multiple high-resolution external displays. The MacBook Neo's ports are much more limited, with one USB-C port supporting up to 10 gigabytes per second, and the other is limited to USB 2 speeds, and the whole machine can only drive one 4K external display at 60 Hz. Again, the MacBook Air can do 2 6K monitors if you choose to. There are also some differences in the overall hardware experience. The MacBook Air includes a more advanced 12-megapixel center stage camera, 4-speaker audio system, and a 3-microphone array, while the Neo uses a similar 1080p camera, dual speakers, and a dual mic setup. From a speaker's perspective, that's where the Neo gets a little interesting. When you're listening to audio, it comes from one firing speaker on each side, and it's just something that we haven't seen before. And I wasn't able to test this in person when I did go to see it. So when I get my unit in, I will be able to do all of that testing for you. But I can't imagine that the MacBook Air won't sound better in this department. But these upgrades, in my opinion, probably make the Air a better option for calls and media consumption, and if you need to record some audio with those better microphones, though I think you can get by just fine with the Neo personally if your needs are just using it for, school or work where you need to do some basic video calls. And you're also going to save $500 at least, so I'm not sure it's worth upgrading to the Air just for those reasons. Now, speaking of the pricing and configuration options, the Neo starts at $599 with 256 gigs of storage, or you can add on an extra $100 and get 512 gigs of storage and Touch ID like I mentioned earlier. But this is Apple's by far most affordable entry point into the Mac lineup, for a laptop at least. The MacBook Air now starts at $1,099, gives you 512 to 4 terabytes if needed in the configurations there, and you can also have a much higher GPU and CPU configuration, and you can get a 15-inch model. And if you max it out completely and go with the 15-inch model, you're looking at $3,000 compared to a Max Neo of $699. So when you break this down, the decision between these 2 laptops becomes fairly straightforward. If you just need a basic laptop, basically you need to do all of the things your phone can do, but it's a lot easier to have it on a Mac and maybe give you a little bit extra power and flexibility. That's the Neo. If you need anything more than that, you're looking at the Air or, the MacBook Pro, but most likely the Air is good for most people. And honestly, if you need to save money, you're going to save a boatload of money. Even if you went with the base models for each, you're looking at $500 difference from $599 with the Neo to $1,099 with the Air. And while the Air will be able to do heavier workloads and probably last you longer than the Neo from a long-term point of view, just based on the configurations and the specs, it's $500 extra. And honestly, I think the Neo will last you quite some time as well if you're just doing the basics. But would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Are you thinking of picking one of these up? Both new MacBook Air and the MacBook Neo go on sale tomorrow. This is on March 11th. In case you're watching this in a future date, it's probably already on sale. So yeah, would love to hear from you. Which one are you planning to choose? What are your overall thoughts? Let me know in those comments down below. This has been Dan with MacRumors. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you around in the next video.